Support for Donnybrook is provided in part by Design Air Heating and Cooling.
Seems fair to me. Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it. Unacceptable by any reason.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's a scorcher this week, but we have a lot of important topics to get to, so let's do that. But first, meet the panelists. Starting with the birthday girl herself, Wendy Wiese, the media veteran. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Joe Holleman, also from the Post-Dispatch and STLtoday.com, and from the St. Louis American. Provocateur extraordinaire, Alvin Reid. Thanks for filling in the past.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be back home.
No. I appreciate you in the middle seat. And I listened on my favorite podcast sources, as I hope everyone does when they're on vacation. You, this week, were at a press conference when the governor of Missouri, Mike Kehoe, announced the much-anticipated police board. Folks know that the city of St. Louis ran the police board from 2013 till earlier this year. Legislative action changed that. Now the police board goes back to the control of the state. So the governor appoints people in addition to the mayor, who has a de facto role on the board. So he appointed Don Brown, the Chevrolet dealer on South Kings Highway, Chris Saraceno, who runs Chris's Docket and Chris's Pancakes, Brad Ortega, whose family has had an aerial photography business for a long time, Eddie McVeigh, who runs Maggie O'Brien's great restaurant in downtown St. Louis.
And Maggie's West in Sunset Hills.
And Maggie's West, never been there, got to get there.
I have.
And then Sonia I'm not surprised, Sonia Jenkins Gray, the formerly embattled personnel director for the city of St. Louis. However, at the press conference, one state senator was conspicuous by his absence, was he not?
Yeah, Steve Roberts was not there. Carla May was there, and I applauded her kind of for being there. Okay, so I walked from the American past the soccer stadium to police headquarters. It was like 100 heat indices. So, it was just a hot day and get in there. So we're waiting for the commissioners to come out, and I did not know who they were. And when Sonia Gray walked out, I thought of Bill, who said part of the reason that we need a state-controlled police board is because of the shenanigans that involved Mrs. Gray. And now she's nominated to be on the police board. Okay. I asked the governor and said, well, Governor, what would you say to those residents of St. Louis that don't favor this, that don't want a state takeover? And he said, well, it worked pretty well from the Civil War until 2013. So my advice to the governor is if anybody asks you a question, but maybe specifically a black man, the first words out of your mouth should not be Civil War. All right. I would not go down that path. While I don't have anything personal animosity against any of these folks that were named to it, I think that I got trouble with no one from the north side being, on this board. And the governor said, well, Chris Ortega grew up in Baden. Well, my mom grew up in Pine Bluff, but, that's a long time ago. Mm-hmm. And I just think more or less, I came away thinking that the police department got to pick who they wanted to be on this board, and the governor acquiesced to them. I have no explanation for Mrs. Gray.
Now, the nominated commissioners, did not take questions, which I thought was unusual.
And we were told before that they would not take questions, they would not make any statements, and that any interviews that...
Not a good sign for transparency.
Right, and a word that was used many times during the press conference. And then we were told that when they do interviews, that will be handled through the police department.
Well, you know what? Your former colleague in the Post-Dispatch, Christine Byers, was recently on Sarah Fenske's podcast, and she said one of the good things about having a police board is transparency, because at the meetings, the commissioners will answer all your questions. Maybe that's not going to happen.
Well, let me talk about Sonia Gray for just a minute, because I did say that was a problem, having city control. I think the important thing you want in a police commissioner is, like in any advisor, you want good judgment. And so I don't know these other men, all these white men who were picked for the board. I'm trusting they have good judgment. Now, Ms. Gray, when she took a city car and a city employee to Jefferson City to look for her husband, I did not think that was good judgment. But maybe the governor is a romantic and thinks when it comes to matters of the heart, judgment goes out the window. I was stunned when he picked Miss Gray.
I think he was trying to take a jab at the previous mayor, Tashara Jones.
And I don't think that's a smart thing to do. I mean,
yeah, I think that the business community certainly has been well served by these appointments, and that was what you wanted.
That's what Bill wanted.
That's what Bill wanted. So we're all pointing our finger at Bill, but no,
right.
I mean they have a lot. They have a great deal at stake. They are invested up to their eyeballs. They probably have been suffering, many of them have been suffering silently for quite a while. I don't have a problem. Governor Kehoe said, this is still Chief Tracy's. This is his operation. And to the police, to the police force, I've got your back and that kind of thing. So why not? Let's maybe think the good thought, maybe hope for the best, and I know that's what you guys are hoping too. But I do think this was, I wasn't surprised about Sonia.
Chief Tracy was in Jeff City arguing against the state takeover.
I think, first of all, I don't think you can't predict how this board is going to behave when they haven't had to behave about anything yet.
That's right.
So whether or not these people turn out to be great commissioners or not, that's guesswork. It's guesswork. So I didn't have any problems with it, other than I did question the Jenkins-Gray appointment. I had questioned nobody from the north side living there now. I don't think living in Baden is quite the same as I live in Baden. Would have been a completely different story. But how about we let them go through their terms, which are all staggered. They can all be replaced. How about before we say this board is bad, we actually let them do something first?
But
Well,
Aldridge
Chris
was the one-
Saraceno does have a record because Chris is currently on the convention board right now. So I don't know if he'll serve in both capacities.
I think all these people have a reputation for being people who have been involved in the community, and I know Chris. So we're not close friends, but I know Chris. We're on a first name basis, and I think what Wendy said is they care about the city. So how about we give them a chance and let's see how they do.
And I'm not saying that, right, I'm not saying that anybody has an ulterior motive or anything like that. Would I say I was somewhat disappointed? Yeah, but I know Eddie. Eddie's a good guy, okay? But I'm just saying that, and I will tell Eddie this the next time I see him. So I'm really not happy with how this all turned out. But, of course, I didn't want the state to take over the police department in the first place.
But Reid Aldridge he was the only one that I heard using the north side as a
Carla did also.
Oh, did she? Okay.
Yes, she did.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
And because of that staggering, who knows what can happen, and in a very short period of time, actually.
Joe Holleman, I want to go to you for a specific reason. After President Trump dropped some bombs on the nuclear facilities this past Friday in Iran, the bombs, the massive ordnance penetrator, is actually made in St. Charles. And Missouri's already gotten a lot of attention in the press because the bombs were delivered by jets from Whiteman Air Force Base, which is on the west side of the state. But I was a little surprised that there wasn't any rallying cry or discussion. Hey, you know what? St. Louis played a role in what might be a very important part in world history by making these bunker busters. And I ask you because your mom was a Rosie Riveter back in the day.
She was Rita the Spot Welder, worked for Emerson Electric, putting little electronic controls on gun turrets for airplanes. So she got hired in 1943 and worked there until the end of the war. Nobody celebrated them. I mean, first of all, I don't think people we have rallies for the people whose boots are on the ground or they're in the ships and in the airplanes flying over the combat zone. I don't think as a rule, there's a lot of people who worked on the Hill making piston rings for World War II. Nobody celebrated them. It was the thankless job that people showed up and did every day, and they didn't rally around them. And my mom remembers the only thing that happened was after the war was over and all the guys came home, all the women got fired. So she said that was her. She wanted to hold on to the job, and they said, no, you got to go home and have babies and cook stuff, So she got fired. But I don't think as a rule, and maybe we should, We don't celebrate those people who make things, though I did see some things at Whiteman, politicians and everything showing banners and
at
expressing
Whiteman.
there, but
You know,
I don't think you have big rallies for it.
In recent years, our congressional delegation has blasted Boeing. Josh Hawley, Cori Bush. I mean, far from being proud of having Boeing in our backyard, which is now making a $2 billion investment, some of our elected leaders have been openly disdainful of it.
Well, but I mean,
Criticism, Charlie.
it was. I was going to say, Boeing.
On certain issues.
Yeah, Boeing had planes falling out of the sky, and I mean, somebody needed to look into that. That was bad on their part. But this is a region that never grasped the space program. See the little space capitals over there, and so I mean, I think we missed that boat. So the fact that we're making armaments, I just don't think that the manufacturers of those.
I think that if you are in what's the city in Connecticut that makes the ships, they're very proud that they have the shipyard year.
Yeah, but there's a difference
New Groton,
between
Connecticut.
Charlie, there's a difference between ships and bombs. I mean, there's something a little
Bunker busters.
strange about celebrating building bombs.
Unless the bomb is used to destroy a bomb. And I know there's some questions as to the efficacy of the whole effort.
Well, that's probably one reason that they're not standing up cheering. Also, we call ships hers. We call bombs bombs.
Right.
So, I mean, there's in our mind, you're right.
You're right. I think it's apples and oranges. I really do.
And I think that might be a traditional media issue. If you are on social media, there is a great deal of pride in where those bombers took off from and where they returned to. Social media, it was sort of a rally around the flag and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Difference.
Thank you. Bill McClellan, I want to ask you about the embattled St. Louis Sheriff, Alfred Montgomery. This week, the Attorney General for the state of Missouri has said that he's filing, I think, a legal procedure called quo warranto to try and remove Alfred Montgomery from his job. Why? Well, he cited that in the allegations that were published this week, he said Mr. Montgomery hired his half-brother. He had deputies drive the kids to school. He refused to take incarcerated prisoners at the jail to the hospital. He spent too much money on badges and golf carts, and the list goes on. I can't remember all the allegations. Do you think Alfred Montgomery, like Kim Gardner, the circuit attorney who is in a similar situation, will resign?
No, I think he'll have to be forced out. I look at this Montgomery against Bailey as kind of, would you rather be eaten by a shark or smothered by a python? Those are my choices. Neither are good, but I think that if we can't get rid of both of them, we ought to get rid of whoever we can, and I think that's going to be Sheriff Montgomery, and I think that the nepotism charge is the only thing that is criminal, and that will be what gets them. I wish that politics were like it was in the days when Barry Goldwater and Howard Baker could go to the White House and get Richard Nixon to resign. I wish that the Democrats in the city could go to Sheriff Montgomery and say, everybody's lost faith, you got to resign. But I don't think Montgomery will.
Well, there was shame in 1972, 1974. That was a pretty big commodity, and so we don't have that anymore. And Sheriff Montgomery isn't unprofessional; he's unhinged. And we still have the rolling of the dice lawsuit that's hanging out there. Right. And I think I said a couple of weeks ago that we were a couple of weeks away from being a national story, and sure enough, it's a national story. And I just think that this is so damning for this community. And I know it sounds silly, but it truly, when people are looking at starting businesses or relocating to certain areas, it's like, what kind of clown show is going on in the city of St. Louis? And so whatever needs to happen, he has to go.
What needs to happen is the City Board of Aldermen and the state legislature need to look at not abolishing the office of sheriff, but changing the way the sheriff, no more elections. No more elections. It's an appointed job. They need to make the changes. They need to look into that. But politicians don't want to because they like the political influence they have over those kind of offices. So they leave them there, and then they get their people jobs when it changes around. Alfred Montgomery does not deserve to be the sheriff of St. Louis. I think it's plain and simple. In a short period of time, he has showed he is incapable of even carrying out the job like a mature adult would. And I'm not saying that the office is a model of efficiency.
I will say, he's not a model of efficiency, as you know, but I think the Attorney General has proven himself to be a worse public servant. Don't you remember when a judge freed a woman by the name of Sandra Hemme, and the Attorney General called the warden and said, "Don't release her"? How unethical was that? He did the same thing with another guy.
I agree.
So does that mean he's
no
wrong
fan
about
of
Alfred
Bailey.
Montgomery?
That means that he has no moral authority over someone.
He's not asking for moral authority.
We want to get rid of Sheriff Montgomery. And if the only
And the
way
Attorney
we can,
General.
Oh yes, but we can't get rid of both of them. Right now, we have to concentrate on getting rid of who we can get rid of.
I know, but when you leave a woman in jail, even
I'm
though
I'm not a fan
then you
of.
argue the guy spent too much money on a golf cart. That's just ridiculous.
Well, I'm not a fan of Andrew.
Well, if
Bailey.
we're going to get down to moral authority from politicians, we're starting to
Yeah, we're
run
gonna have
into
to be
pretty
here for a long
we should
time.
expect it. We should expect
but
it.
we're talking about Alfred Montgomery. Now you say should find out a way to get rid of Andrew Bailey. Find out something he did.
I will
and
say
make a
one
move.
thing about Alfred Montgomery. I'm no big fan of his, but he was elected by the people.
Well, there you go.
And I would
it's
say
only
that.
been 6
Well,
months.
So was Kim
I will
Gardner,
also
so
say-
was the St. Louis City School Board.
But I will say that Kim Gardner was a threat to public safety.
Right.
I think we all acknowledge that. I don't think he's come to that point. I think even if it went to trial or whatever they call it or hearing, I think the only thing that would bring him down was this half brother.
Me too.
And quite frankly, I think David Mason, who is like representing him, I think he could make the argument that you share a father does not make you related. I know that kind of sounds crazy. But
It does sound crazy, Alvin. If you share a father, you're related.
But I'm just saying that will be what would bring him
that's
down.
being disputed right now legally. But if he has to go because of nepotism, then what about Kanika Cunningham, the health director in the county,
Dennis
or
Hancock.
Dennis
Hancock.
Hancock?
Yeah.
And
Well,
the
Dennis
Attorney
Hancock
General
was
hasn't gone after
absolved.
them.
I think Alvin
Dennis
and I
Hancock was absolved.
I think Alvin and I on this show have agreed. I don't like the quo warranto process in general. They were elected. Let people elect them out. But I think you bring up the very good point of people need to pay attention that, we the voters of St. Louis put him in there. We the voters of St. Louis need to remove him from there when the time comes. And all the politicians that backed him to the hilt, and there were a few, also need to be held accountable for that. I don't like removing people who are elected by non-elective means, except as Alvin and I have agreed, Kim Gardner, it was a danger to our safety.
Okay.
Yeah,
And so
and yes,
that
Bill,
needed to be done.
people who have the same father are related.
Yeah.
I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying that, I don't know, you got to make a case in a court, and
Maybe
I
not
don't
during
know.
the-
that-
maybe not during
And I don't even like the anti-nepotism stuff
county.
myself. I think if you want to hire your stepdaughter like Mr. Hancock did, or your half-brother like the sheriff did, you should be allowed to.
You've been on
But-
record. Yeah. Wendy, I want to ask you, Ryan McClellan, who heads up the Gateway Arch Foundation. It's the not-for-profit that tries to augment the Gateway Arch and has done so, raising hundreds of millions of dollars to put a lid over Highway 44 now and to expand the Arch grounds, and Keener Plaza, all that and more. So he's interviewed by the Business Journal on their podcast, and he says it might take a couple of decades, but we think we should expand into Illinois. What do you think about that?
I think it's exciting. I could see terraces of maybe dining rooms, outdoor dining rooms. I know that might sound silly, but everything is cyclical. And East St. Louis used to be a very affluent, prosperous area, Collinsville and the like. So North St. Louis, my alma mater, Visitation Academy, was once upon a time located in North St. Louis. So absolutely, I think it's exciting, and I think it would, because if we have visitors from all over the world, which we do, and I think that lid obviously statistically has helped so much bring visitors downtown to the Arch. Imagine what having something on both sides would do for just the interest and the allure of one of the most beautiful national monuments that we have.
And I was an intern in Cincinnati in 1981. Everybody's like, don't go over to Kentucky. There ain't nothing over there you want. And I was back again. I knew this had transformed, but I was back again this spring. And they changed what is right across the river. we need, if this is an opportunity to just, get a beachhead, so to speak, we need to make good on it.
Condos, restaurants.
The national park? Wouldn't you rather have restaurants and condos and boat slips? You're not talking about more green space.
But you got to start somewhere. I mean,
they're talking about expanding the national park, maybe getting the Illinois congressional delegation in on it.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, okay, has the expanded arch really improved our downtown St. Louis?
But if we could develop that side, and it won't be Johnson County, Kansas overnight, but at the same time, let's start making some inroads, and then maybe 20 years from now, that will truly be part of the little St. Louis metropolitan area. Because right now it's nothing.
Gondolas across the river.
That's exactly right.
Well,
That's
and I
addressed
exactly
that. Ryan
right.
McClellan did. He said probably not an aerial tram, but I just came back from Europe where I saw some aerial trams and they're fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think if you spread the national park across the river, you will then incentivize people developing these restaurants and things you want.
Agreed.
If there's a national park ground there, then you put your restaurant right on the other
Then
side.
why hasn't that worked in downtown St. Louis?
Well, I mean,
Okay, and I'll tell you.
What do you mean it hasn't worked in
Okay,
downtown
I'll give you
St.
an
Louis?
example. I used to work at 1 Memorial Drive with Wendy, 3rd floor, okay? KMWX moved out in 2013. That is still empty space.
but that was COVID.
And it's right across from the Arch ground.
That was-
That's because of the price. No, wait a minute. Now, hold
Have you
it.
seen
That was
the
a
Millennium
two- that was a-
Hotel?
Charlie,
Have
that
you
was
seen
a-
the Mansion House? They're all empty.
Charlie, that was a 3-year global
Tear 'em down and put up a
pandemic
national park.
that we are still, believe it or not, kind of recovering.
We
Yeah.
moved out in 2013, Wendy.
Okay.
The pandemic started in 2020.
Right.
Hey, Charlie, if that arch wasn't down there, St. Louis wouldn't be here. I don't know
it
what.
would.
Well, okay, you
No.
think so?
No.
Well, all right.
The arch in the
The arch
baseball
and the
stadium, if
Cardinals.
they weren't there,
That's right.
we'd be dead.
We'd be in
It'd
trouble.
be
We
over.
said about
Dead.
this baseball stadium.
We'd be in
Right.
trouble.
Bill McClellan, I want to ask you about an article that was in your publication this week. It took a shot at Chip Caray, the Cardinals broadcaster. He had a slip of the tongue. He was reading a promo. The word said flag. Instead, he said a word that rhymes with flag that is a pejorative. And so it became a story. I opened up your website. It was the top story, lead story, that Chip Caray made a mistake. Don't you print journalists have any respect for the broadcasters who are going to have slips of the tongue?
Well, first, Charlie, calm down.
This one bothered me.
Okay. Well, Charlie, the Cardinals are one of the biggest stories in St. Louis year after year, and the reporter who covers them, who right now is Derek Gould, who does a great job, has to cover everything that happens. And when there's a 30-second delay, 30 seconds of silence on the air, you have to report. People wonder, what the heck happened? And so Derek had to happen, and it was not a mean-spirited story. And I thought that the Cardinals and FanDuel or whoever, is the boss, handled it very well, saying it was a slip of the tongue and we're not going to punish them and there'll be no more about it. And I don't think that many people were as excited about it as you are.
It became a national story.
I'm gonna go
and
to
Sports
that.
Illustrated condemned the Post-Dispatch for it.
All right. I will say that the first story that came out, and I don't think was Derek's, as a matter of fact. But anyway, the first one he had said something or whatever, but it didn't say. So I immediately just,
That's right.
in the little, whatever you call the little banner up there, I said, what did Chip Caray say? New York Daily News, Sports Illustrated, all these different publications of differing, size, status. Some of them were just gossip sheets, but they all had exactly what he said. So the Post-Dispatch would have been remiss if they did not report exactly what he said.
I'd like to speak to it as someone who had to cover the incident where a local caster here used a pejorative phrase.
Kevin
Kevin Steinkrug.
It was a slip of the tongue.
And
he lost his job.
I reported
his
about
career.
it. And I reported about it, Charlie. And the reason was you had everybody talking about it and everybody knew it. So then it comes down to a news decision. We have to put something in. This is a subject that needs to be addressed, because if you don't address it, then the question comes up, and especially in this case is, why are they covering up for the Cardinals?
Cardinals.
News is what happens, and sometimes it's uncomfortable and it's embarrassing. And the only reason this would be a dead story right now, except we're talking about it tonight.
It's clickbait, and you don't want to know something? The Boston Globe, the Washington Post, New York Times wouldn't do it unless it resulted in harm. And I just think.
Oh, I disagree.
I disagree with you completely.
I know it's
Wait a
true.
minute.
I absolutely disagree with
Do you think that if anybody on radio in New York let that word go,
Or Boston.
that the
Happens
New
all
York
the
Times,
time.
no,
But
No, it
Howard
doesn't.
Stern on the radio,
but
it's
that's
every
on-
other
no.
phrase.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Boston-
wait,
According
during
to
a
terms-
Mets or a Yankees game?
Boston is a haven for LGBTQ for the community, and so I'm sure in Boston
They would
something
cover
have been
that
made of
story.
it.
That
but,
story
But
would.
as Alvin
if
has
there's
said
30
1,000
seconds of airtime where nobody's saying everything, people say, what's going on?
That's actually more frequent than you realize.
Not
That was
to,
a
not to
delay.
mention
Yeah.
40,000, 100,000 people who are listening to it going, did that person just say what I think he said?
Right.
And if there's papers in Boston and New York that are not reporting on that, then shame on them,
No, I
Charlie.
don't think so.
Shame on them.
By the way, I think Derek Gould is a great writer. I just think he made a mistake on
That's
this.
what we all
My
say,
opinion.
Charlie.
Yeah.
No one here is saying that Derek Gould.
No, I know. I want to make it clear for me.
All right. Oh,
And I think nobody
Hey,
really made Chip Carey sound bad.
Right, no.
Nobody's saying he's a terrible guy.
You know what? By putting it
Kevin
there, it was very
Steincross-
embarrassing.
Okay.
Indeed it was.
You can write us with your opinions. Care of 9PBS 63108. Don't forget on social media, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. And you can call the 9 line at 314-512-9094. Listen to us on your favorite podcast source. And of course, tune in to the 9PBS YouTube channel because we'll be talking about Canada geese and animal shelters. And happy birthday to the one and only Wendy Wiese.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. So it's official.
You're 50?
Yeah, 46 if you are
Oh,
in backwards
I'm sorry.
land.
This is a short
it
period
for
of
this
time when
week's
we're the
program.
same age.
Oh my
Thank you so
God.
much. See you next week at this time.
and I think people are going to say,
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.